Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to preview the Week 7 FanDuel main slate. Jared, it's the first 6-team bye of the year, but I'm not really sure that that's going to carry as big a shock as it usually does because we've had several weeks of London games already. We've had some big matchups in primetime the past couple of weeks, taking some key players out of our player pool. The slate, though, does include some pretty low projected game totals that figure to impact the way we play this main slate, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this looks like the ugliest main slate of the year so far, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I think it might be better if we're putting the work in. But yeah, just a lot of bad offenses on the main slate, and a few games that are going to be impacted by weather. Most of the outdoor games on the East Coast are going to have wind issues, so definitely check on that Sunday morning before finalizing any lineups.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out, of course, but the high-scoring slates tend to be annoying because you're like, I put together a pretty good lineup, but everybody scored 200 points this week.
Exactly. I've had more success on slates that don't have the massive scores, and you get one lower owned guy go off, and you're in good shape.
Yeah, you got to put in the work and find the guys, and that's what we're here to do. And we're going to start at quarterback, where Matthew Stafford looked very attractive last week. Didn't quite pay off, but it wasn't his fault. We'll talk about that in a minute. Down $600 in FanDuel salary versus where he was last week. Like I said, he disappointed with his lowest FanDuel score of the season in week 6, but it's not because he played poorly. He had a season high 9.4 yards per pass attempt, just attempted 24 passes, only had 1 touchdown, another that Puka Nacua couldn't quite pull in. Team still scored 26 points. So to me, it was just one of those where the process was fine. The result wasn't what we were looking for. Are you going back to Matthew Stafford in FanDuel cash lineups?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's just way too cheap. And I would expect the pass volume to come way up this week, especially with the Rams without Kyron Williams. I think they're going to go super pass heavy for as long as this game is close. I do worry about the Steelers pass rush against the Rams O-line, and Matt Stafford has not been great under pressure, but when he does have time, I think he's going to be super effective. The Steelers are actually just 21st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterback. So as long as we can get enough Stafford dropbacks where he's not under pressure, I think he'll have a nice game.
Tournament side at quarterback, who do you like?
I kind of like Geno Smith here on FanDuel for a couple of reasons. One, he's $300 more than Matt Stafford, which I think is going to keep people off Geno Smith. We have him projected now for 9% ownership, so not super low, but not chalk either. The other thing here is I think if people play the Seahawks, they're more likely to play Kenneth Walker in the running game, which is probably the higher percentage bet. I do think, it's more likely to be a Ken Walker game, but there's always a chance that, 3 of the touchdowns go to Geno Smith in the passing game. And, Arizona is just as weak against the pass as they are against the run. You have Seattle with the second highest implied total on the main slate at 26 points. It's actually just a point lower than the Chiefs. So, we all love the Chiefs offense, but at least the lines are telling us that, the Seahawks offense is just as likely to have as much success this week. So I like playing Geno probably with either Metcalf or Lockett, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba as the second stack there. JSN's only $4,900 on FanDuel.
What about, not for like an all my tournament lineups kind of thing, but what about Geno Smith and Ken Walker and a wide receiver in a slate where we've talked about there are a lot of low scoring games, and maybe we're just saying this is the team that's going to score a bunch of points this week. A bet that they score 5 touchdowns and Geno gets 3 of them and Walker scores 2. And you've not only gotten all those points, but you've also leveraged against any of those Ken Walker teams.
I like it. Again, I think it has to be smaller field tournaments. Like you wouldn't want to do that in like the Sunday Million on FanDuel. Where you got to beat out hundreds of thousands of other teams. The other thing on FanDuel here is Ken Walker is expensive. So like you need more out of him on FanDuel here than you do on DraftKings. But on the other hand, the half PPR helps Ken Walker. So I think you can do that. You can use Ken Walker with Geno Smith. It would just have to be in a smaller tournament, something with like under 5,000 teams.
Yeah, certainly not this is the play this week, but one of those like maybe think about trying this among your entries. Yep. Running back Isiah Pacheco again leads in dollars per point, just like he does on DraftKings for week 7. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs is worth bringing up for FanDuel. He's much cheaper than the rest of the top 6 in our FanDuel dollars per point. If you look in the lineup generator, $6,200 is the FanDuel salary for Gibbs. But Jared, I wonder, is he too risky coming off that hamstring injury to go in cash lineups here?
Yeah, I'm struggling with Gibbs because he's too cheap. Like assuming he plays, he's too cheap for the volume he's going to get if he doesn't suffer a setback. So like that's what you're fading if you're playing Gibbs and cash. I do think there are enough other strong running back plays on FanDuel this week that you don't have to play Jahmyr Gibbs and cash, but he's definitely like, he should be in your pool, and you should, at least, mess around with lineups with Jahmyr Gibbs, because, getting him for 6,200 really opens up a lot for the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, I agree. So who are some of those other two strong plays at running back?
Pacheco is definitely the first guy in for me. He's just too cheap on FanDuel here, but the, half PPR, which definitely helps him versus on DraftKings. Pacheco kind of got eased in to start the season, but over the last 3 weeks, he's played 61% of the Chiefs' offensive snaps. He's handled 70% of the Chiefs' carries. Only 3 running backs have a higher rush attempt share than 70% over the course of the season. Pacheco also has a 10% target share over the last 3 games. So, add it all up, and he's averaging 17 carries and 3.3 targets per game over the last 3. I think, we can expect something close to that this week against the Chargers, who, are still not a good run defense. They're a bit better than they have been the past couple of years, but they're still just 24th in run defense DVOA.
Couldn't have gotten much worse than the past couple of years. Yeah. On the tournament side, Gibbs seems to me to be an easier fade because he is bound for fairly high popularity, and you throw in the negative matchup. It's not hard to imagine a path where the Lions are successful on offense, and it doesn't necessarily include a boom week for Jahmyr Gibbs. So what are you looking at running back here?
A nice pivot off Jahmyr Gibbs at a similar price is Javonte Williams at $6,000. He's now a year removed from his knee injury. Now, we're not doctors. We don't know exactly what that means, but at some point he's going to get close or, back to 100%. And I do think we're going to get a breakout game at some point this season. Maybe it's too early, but we did see Javonte Williams last week set season highs in both PFF rushing grade and yards after contact per attempt. He's coming off, a mini bye week this week with, having played the Thursday game. So a little extra rest can help. And he gets a Packers run defense that is 26th in run defense DVOA, 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back. So it's definitely not a safe play. The Broncos have seemed unwilling to give, Williams hasn't topped 13 carries in a game yet this season. So I wonder if there's still some sort of volume cap on him, which would obviously hurt, but especially in a week where, it's going to be low scoring, there's not a ton of attractive high ceiling running back plays. I do think, maybe taking a shot on Javonte Williams could pay off.
And we learned on the DraftKings show that you don't mind taking a shot on guys that aren't very good, or it might not have great ceilings with Jordan Love.
There's your run back on your Jordan Love stacks.
Oh my God. I would have to put a blindfold on to set that lineup. Wide receiver, it's not just Cooper Kupp up top. He and Puka Nacua sit 1-2 in our FanDuel dollars per point. Are one of those guys going into your cash lineup on FanDuel?
Definitely one, and I think you could play both, honestly. I made a lineup. If you go cheap at quarterback and tight end, you can play both of them. I think Puka is actually the first guy in for me just because of the savings. $7,300 feels like a nice price tag. I know he disappointed last week. He saw a 29% target share. We talked about, the Rams just didn't throw. Puka had a drop touchdown in the end zone. It could have been a better game. I still think he's going to play a massive role in this passing game. And the Steelers are 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers.
On the attorney side, Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua are all going to be popular, but I wonder, how popular is it going to be to play all 3 of them in the same lineup?
Probably not super popular, but again, it's possible. The cash lineup I was working on had all 3 of those guys in there. So I don't think it's going to be super contrarian, but it's also not going to be, so popular where you can't play it. Going back to the Packers, I like Romeo Doubs as a tournament play. I like the passing game in this spot against Denver. We've been attacking the Broncos defense all season. Romeo Doubs is $6,200. He's projected for 4% ownership versus Christian Watson at 20% ownership. And I love Watson. I think he's an awesome tournament play. He has, the ceiling to help you win a tournament. But, Romeo Doubs has seen a 23% target share this season. I know most of that has come without Christian Watson, but, we even heard in the summer that Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs had, kind of been building some chemistry. So I do think Doubs is going to, probably stay around a 20% target share for the rest of the season, which is a solid mark. And I also wonder if we're going to see Pat Surtain, the Broncos top corner, the Broncos only good cornerback, shadow or at least spend most of the game on Christian Watson. And if that's the case, you're going to get Romeo Doubs on Damari Mathis. And Mathis is the guy we've been attacking all season in DFS and fantasy in general. Mathis still, among 93 qualifying cornerbacks. He is 92nd in PFF coverage grade. He's allowed the 4th most receiving yards in coverage. He's allowed the 4th highest passer rating in coverage. So whichever of these Packers wide receivers finds themselves on Mathis this weekend is, probably going to have a big game.
I would bet that Jordan Love got no better than a C in chemistry. We got to move away from that game before you start trying to talk people into AJ Dillon. But I have a feeling that we're not done talking about that game, because next up is tight end, where at the top, it feels like we're back to real life. Travis Kelce was off the main slate last week, but we're back to him and Mark Andrews leading the FanDuel dollars per point, which is the case most weeks. And what might be the case most weeks going forward is Sam Laporta joining them up there, because he has already settled in as a high-priced tight end on FanDuel who's up there anyway because he's incapable of not scoring a bunch of fantasy points. What do you like at cash tight end?
Yeah, so I think the other Packer you were referring to is Luke Musgrave. I do think is in play for cash at 5,000. Musgrave's who you have to play if you do want to play Cooper Kupp, at least in the lineups I've been working on. If you want to get off Kupp, I mean, I like Mark Andrews. I think it's a nice price for Andrews at $6,900. I mean, you're getting a $1,600 discount off Travis Kelce. And, the Lions defense is good. We definitely respect the Lions defense, but they are 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. You look at their schedule so far, they really haven't faced many good tight ends, but they are allowing a 75% catch rate to the position. Both Atlanta tight ends caught 5 passes against Detroit. So I definitely think it's a spot where, the Ravens might look to attack a Lions defense that, is pretty strong everywhere else.
And from the real life side, they have some good players now, but there's no single player on that defense that looks scary as a matchup for a tight end. So yeah, I think it's a potentially good spot for Mark Andrews. I know it's going out on a limb to say that Mark Andrews might score points. Tourney side at tight end, what do you like?
No one wants to play Jonnu Smith still. I mean, he's projected for 1% ownership. I think you keep playing him in tournaments at $5,400. I'm
sorry to interrupt, but I found Jonnu Smith on a dynasty waiver wire on FFPC this week. I was shocked.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, even in FFPC main event, he was still available as of, a week or two ago. So I get it. Like, people don't want to buy into it, especially with the whole 2 tight ends from one team thing. But Arthur Smith's a weird dude. He's making it happen. Yeah, I mean, over the last 5 weeks, Jonnu Smith is 9th among tight ends in targets, 5th in catches, 5th in receiving yards. I expect it to continue where, it's Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Jonnu Smith as, the top 3 pass catchers on that team.
And jokes aside, like in most cases, 2 tight ends can't coexist, but Kyle Pitts is more wide receiver than he is tight end. So it's not like they have 2 guys setting up at either end of the offensive line running routes. That's just not the reality of the Atlanta offense. So flex on FanDuel, what are you planning to play there?
Well, speaking of the Falcons, I mean, I know Bijan Robinson's been underwhelming so far, but I think $7,500 is a solid price tag for him. So I think he's in play for cash. If you want another cheaper running back and don't want to play Jahmyr Gibbs, I think Jerome Ford for $6,600. I don't think Ford's volume projection is all that different than Jahmyr Gibbs is this week. And Ford has a better matchup against the Colts than Gibbs does. Tournament side, I mentioned JSN. I think at $4,900, Smith and Jigba is worth a look. I also wanted to mention Chris Godwin, $6,500. The Falcons have been good against wide receivers, but it's more outside wide receivers that have struggled against them. There's actually been some slot receivers that have had nice games against Atlanta. Now, Chris Godwin's slot rate is down this season. It's around 30%. He's not going to get all that slot work, but it's also, spot maybe if the Bucs coaching staff is smart, they see the matchup and they put Chris Godwin in the slot more in the spot, which they should do. So we'll see if Dave Canales is sharp or not.
The other thing is you can play less in the slot and still, just maximize the few opportunities you get there.
For sure. Yeah. And 6,500 is a nice price tag for Godwin.
Defense, is it $3,400 Giants against Washington this week? I'm surprised that there's just a 1% ownership projection on them right now.
Yeah. I'm at least going to play the Giants in cash at that price tag. I mean, I'm going to take my 4+ sacks on Sam Howell and just sort of move on for cash games.
4+ is like the over under on sacks for Sam Howell. I mean, I laid it out earlier this week on Twitter, not only how many sacks he's taken, but how much above average every single defense is getting against him. And if you look at numbers beyond that, it's not like it's just poor blocking. The blocking has been like not great, but also not league worst. It looks like it's Sam Howell also taking a lot of those sacks, creating a lot of those sacks, similar to what Deshaun Watson's done throughout his career.
Yeah, for sure. And Sam Howell was a high sack rate guy in college too, so it's definitely part of his game.
What else are you playing on defense?
A lot of intriguing tournament plays, I think, for me, especially at the ownerships we're seeing. The Browns at $4,500, I think they're even a bit too cheap at that price tag, and they're projected for just 6% ownership. I like the Steelers at 4,200, projected for just 3% ownership. Just a defense that we know the pass rush is good. We think Matt Stafford is going to drop back, 40 plus times in this spot. So that just creates upside for your defense.
Yeah, just don't play Stafford, Cup, Puka, and Steelers
Yeah.
defense in the same lineup.
Of course, or although it is stuff like that wins these massive tournaments that you look on paper like it makes no sense, but it ends up working. So I don't know.
If you want to play one lineup like that and bet that TJ Watt has a fumble return for a touchdown
Yep.
and all the rest of the touchdowns go to the Rams passing game, go for it. I just wouldn't make it your base.
Agreed.
The lineup generator on draftsharks.com is ready to help you build winning lineups for week 7. We've got those dollars per point rankings that we've been talking about throughout. We've got ceiling projections. You can filter it by matchups, positive or negative. You can mess with the team stacks to see who you can play besides Jared's Packers this week. Make sure you check out Kevin's articles to see who he recommends playing in FanDuel cash games, as well as in tournament lineups. And as always, our goal here is to help you win week 7.